Hello, Bill. I'd like to introduce you to anybody who's joining us for the first time. This is Bill Waller, who's the esteemed editor of the Journal of Economic Issues, and he enjoys commenting on lunacy in general, but particularly economic madness.
And of course, my partner in crime here is Linda Robertson, our media maven, formerly a teacher in media and society. And she has opinions on absolutely everything that she must share. So
It's important.
it's important.
Ever since I retired. So, Bill, what are we going to be talking about today?
We'll also talk about House Speaker Mike Johnson's disingenuously scheduling a vote in the House to release the Epstein Files. This vote will be next week. Additionally, we will talk about the fact that it appears that the SNAP benefits will resume in 3 days, showing once again that Trump lied about it. Republicans are also scrambling to put forward a health care plan, as they have been since 2016. And then I must point out our media maven was correct last week when she told us that the BBC would indeed apologize to Trump over the, quote, misleading edit. So that's the things we're going to talk about today, and I think we should start talking about the cowardly Democrats defecting. 6 Democrats voted with Republicans to end the government shutdown, for which they got a promise from the Republicans, wrap your head around that, to have a vote on extending health care subsidies. Of course, this was a vote in the Senate to do that, and that would require a similar vote in the House. The House may not go along with anything decided in the Senate, and Trump could veto any legislation they passed anyway.
Well, that's the key. I think we may have a minor disagreement on this. I did write to a number of my people who I message that the question would be, the big victory for the Democrats in the off-year elections, that I wondered if the Democrats would, as usual, snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. I was really thrilled to see that Rachel Maddow used the same phrase. Your view is, yes, that's exactly what they did by having those senators defect, that they made a huge mistake, they disappointed everybody, they got nothing out of it.
Yeah. I mean, there is no tangible change in the policy as a result of having the government closed for 40 days. They did not get the restoration of the subsidies, and they did get SNAP restarted, which is of some benefit.
Well, here's why I wonder. First of all, during the time that was locked down, Americans became really aware of not only the costs, but how the Republicans viewed the costs. They were willing to watch people who were working Americans go without food. And not only were they willing to do that, they were willing to take that all the way to the Supreme Court to make sure they didn't get their food. And at the same time, Donald Trump is having these hoochie-coochie orgies at Mar-a-Lago. There couldn't be anything more like a Gilded Age novel by Edith Wharton than that. And that will be used in future elections.
Well, I hope so, but the Democrats don't have that good a track record. The other thing is this is going to be spun by the Republicans is, yes, this was a terrible thing to do, but this is what we needed to do to force the Democrats to come to their senses, and the idiots finally did, and we won.
Yes, but they've tried that, and all of the polls show that's not working, that the Republicans are blamed for the shutdown and for harsh indifference to what happens to the lives of people, and that's going to get worse when people have to start paying those increases.
Well, that'll be in January. But the other thing, too, is you have to recall the U.S. electorate has the attention span of a wren.
I think you're giving them a little bit more credit than they deserve. I would have said newt.
Okay. But the key is the next spectacle, the next horrendous thing Trump does will take this right into a different news cycle, and they will forget all this like they've forgotten all the other things.
Well, I do think the other thing that you just said a moment ago was important, and that is there was no way that they would get it past Trump. They didn't have a veto-proof majority, and Schumer is concerned, evidently, primarily, with winning elections. And he thought, he told those defecting senators he didn't have an opinion one way or the other, which infuriates me, but still it shows he's not actually engaged with the realities of how people are living their lives, but with strategizing for the next election. And that may be why there's so much discussion about challenging his leadership or putting up somebody in the primaries.
Well, I think Schumer is done being the minority leader. I think they need someone else who's going to take a more forward-looking and proactive approach to dealing with the Republicans in the Senate, because if they don't, they're going to be put into a situation of playing chicken with Trump over and over and over, and he won't blink because he doesn't care.
Well, that's true enough, because he's a lame duck. But
I think that the lesson from the mayoral election in New York here is instructive. If you take a positive approach to this, put out a program there rather than jousting with the Republicans, put some things out there that they have to respond to that where they're not setting the agenda. I think that's a much more powerful approach for the Democrats in the Senate.
No, it certainly proved to be true in the case of Mondani. Now, but there was this whole problem of the Republicans deciding not only didn't they want to feed the population, but they couldn't because it would just take so long to get the SNAP started again.
Yeah, the USDA official in charge, when asked by reporters, said that the benefits could resume in 3 days. It's just a matter of getting the employees back, starting up the machinery, and hitting the return. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but not terribly. So that just shows, once again, Trump lied about the difficulty of distributing the benefits. And then that makes some kind of sense because I can't believe Trump has any idea how these benefits are paid. They're paid by electronic transfers to EFT cards, basically Visa or MasterCards, distributed by the government, and all they have to do is hit an electronic device that then reloads the money onto there. It's very simple, automatic. And what's the point of telling such transparent lies except to get you to the next day?
Well, I had a rather unnerving experience during this. For some reason, I dropped in on a local news broadcast or local newscast from Louisville, Kentucky, talking about the long lines trying to get to the church that was distributing food. And they were talking to some of the people about the difficulties they would have feeding their families because it was just not possible, but that they would have to rely upon this kind of volunteer service, which, by the way, was going on across the country. I then did something I shouldn't have done, which was to read the comments. And many people said, thank God there are food sources that are being distributed voluntarily. This is a terrible thing to happen in America. But then there were these really vicious remarks. And most of them came down to the fact that the people who were on SNAP were lazy and needed to get a job, or that they were cheating because, look, they have really nice cars. And then other people would respond and say, if you think those are nice cars, I wonder what you think a junker is. Okay, I mean, this is the level of discussion. Then I did something I should never do, which is I responded and said, just to help you out a little bit here, you have to be employed to be on SNAP. These are working Americans who cannot make ends meet. And because they're working, they need a car. And because they have a car, they need fuel and insurance. I did not say, if you think those cars are so special and yours isn't, why don't you get a better job? But I did not say that. Anyhow, I got a response from a woman who kind of merge the lines between welfare and SNAP, but she said that she and her husband had a disabled child. She said they had to rely on her husband's very low income, was about to go up because he was going to get promoted. She couldn't get a job no matter how many places she went to, so she decided to go back to school to get qualified. But meanwhile, they're really dependent. But she was confusing being on welfare with being on SNAP. And I worry, Bill, that still isn't clear in the minds of Americans, that you have to be working. You have to be working in a country where even if you're working, you're not earning enough to provision your family.
Yes, I'm not sure that you have to be working, but the overwhelming majority of SNAP benefits go to working people.
Right, or disabled.
And people have to understand this is 19% of the population is on SNAP. So this is a supplemental program. It's not a basic program. And it's a USDA, United States Department of Agriculture program. It's not a Health and Human Services program. So it's really about selling food. It's not about helping the poor.
And a number of farmers tried to make that clear, but, they don't have the range of broadcasting news that other networks do. They were trying to say at a time when we're trying to figure out where to sell our crops this year, this is not what we need, that you're undermining us. And yes, I did mean to say that if you're able-bodied and on SNAP, you're working. If you're elderly or disabled, of course, you're receiving the food so you don't just starve to death.
The confusion about government support programs has been going on since their inception in 1935 with the Social Security Act. And it gets ever more confusing because people don't like cash distribution anyway. They prefer aid in kind, but that's extremely inefficient in helping people move along. You may be giving them housing, but they may need food. You may be giving them food, but they may need clothing.
No.
Generally speaking, giving them cash is preferred. So when you give an in-kind benefit like SNAP, where it has to be used on food, that rearranges people's finances. That money goes to food, and the food money they were putting into food before is redistributed to cover other expenses like car insurance, gas, transportation, work. So it's very distorting.
Well, I guess it would be helpful if more people in elected office, and certainly more reporters, mentioned what the requirements are for SNAP, so that even the most vicious of person could be answered. But speaking of vicious, of the most vicious person we can think of, there was that whole Epstein drop. Now, we had vowed never to talk about this.
I hate talking about
because it's
Epstein.
so sordid. But we just have to, don't we?
Yeah. House Speaker Mike Johnson scheduled a vote next week in the House of Representatives to release the Epstein Files, those accumulated by the Department of Justice. He, of course, did this because there were the votes to compel a motion to release them available. And so since it was inevitable, Johnson called Trump, told him that this was going to happen. And actually, the Republicans' leadership is very concerned because the vast majority of Republicans may vote for their release as to please their MAGA voters, and it could look really bad. They did talk about something about concerns about creating a veto-proof majority, but the Senate Majority Leader pointed out this is not legislation. This is a House committee. They can release what they want, and it's not like Trump could stop it with a veto. It doesn't require any legislation anyway.
So the legislation is what? To force the Department of Justice to release the files?
No, it's just a vote for the documents subpoenaed by the House Oversight Committee.
Right.
Will then be released to the public by virtue of a vote of the House of Representatives. It doesn't involve DOJ. They can't stop it. And Congress has a legitimate oversight role, and part of their oversight role is deciding what's going to be released and what isn't. Now I figured that I totally believe Donald Trump. There's nothing in there that's going to make him look bad, because so we just shouldn't bother. It's all trumped up.
so to speak.
So to speak. But the point is, if there was nothing in there that wasn't going to make him look bad, why would he be trying so hard to stop this sordid stuff from coming out? Unless it's worse than we can even imagine. And trust me, I can imagine some pretty disgusting things with regard to this creep.
Yeah.
So, this is just, God, I wish Epstein would just die.
He tried.
Yeah, I know.
He tried hard, but
This is like a venereal disease. It's a gift that keeps on giving. Yeah, I just want it to go away, but now it's inevitable. We're going to wallow in this now until every word in these documents is discussed by 5 clowns on evening television. So,
well, as your media maven,
yeah,
I looked more at the issue of performance and spectacle.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about Epstein and performance and spectacle.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, people, settle down. Just settle down.
Yuck.
First of all, Adelita Grijalva was finally sworn in. And
Yes,
she
of course.
gave a great speech that, without using the speaker's name, basically said, "Who do you think you are? Delaying the legal government function for your own political reasons. Who do you think you are?" And she got us very strong standing ovations. So, I mean, it was mostly Democrats, but who cares? Okay. So she's now sworn in. She signs the petition. That means that the speaker had to put it on the agenda. He doesn't have a choice, but he's acting like this is just a big deal for him, that he's being so generous.
Right. This is all theater to make it look like he's not complicit in trying to hold these things back for 6 months.
Yeah, and then some of the Republicans in the House who have been supporters of Trump in the past are signing on to the petition.
Yes, well, let's just be crass here. There's a midterm election coming up. MAGA wanted to see these files, and if this vote is going to go against Trump anyways, I would vote for it if I were a Republican. There's nothing to be gained by, at this point, resisting this, except confessing that you'll do A, anything Trump wants, or B, you've seen these files and it's going to be awful. That would be the only reasons to vote against it at this point.
Well, I do think the Republicans are in a state of, they're upset and excited, but here are the other things I noticed about this release. One was the email that Epstein sent, I think, to his partner in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell, saying, you have to notice there's the dog that isn't barking. Now, of course, that refers to a very famous Sherlock Holmes mystery where the dog doesn't bark in the stable because the dog recognized the person in the stable, which means the person in the stable who was the murderer was known to the dog. Am I going too fast?
No, I read the books as a kid.
Okay, so my point is, all of the coverage of this has just used that phrase, the dog isn't barking, without telling where it comes from, what the source is. Does that mean they think that the American public who elected Donald Trump president is smart enough or well-read enough to grasp that illusion?
Okay. That depends on who is saying it on the news. Most newscasters are voices in suits with makeup, so they didn't think that far. But there is a concern, I would think, in the minds of thinking people that this suggests that the dog who's not barking is Donald Trump being quiet because he does not want to draw attention to himself.
Well, precisely. And there's no question about that. It's just, it's a metaphor and a literary illusion.
Yeah.
It's not being explained. We're not a country with a high level of literacy. We're not France, for instance. We're not England. So that interested me. The second thing that interested me was the redacted message that said that Trump had spent many hours with, and then that's redacted, and in brackets it says a victim. Okay. Spent many hours, I take it, at Epstein's ever-famous house. Well, immediately the the press secretary and certain Republicans came out and said, well, that's Virginia Jeffrey. And besides that, in her book, she says, Trump never did anything bad. And I thought, would you explain to me why you are revealing the name that was redacted? Wouldn't it have been better to just shut up? But they knew who was redacted because the Republicans were on the committee. And then I guess they thought they were being snotty by releasing all those other memos, messages, bills, records, while saying there's a lot of Democrats who are named too, but there weren't any that anybody's come across. So what was that about?
I think that the Republicans think that if they can paint the Democrats with the same brush as this may paint Trump, that will somehow lessen the response to Trump. But, that's misreading his people. His people have this sense, the MAGA people are true believers in certain precepts.
Yes.
And they expect the Democrats to behave this way. And seeing that Trump is behaving this way, they will find this revolting either way. Nobody is going to be surprised if there are rich Democrats who were involved with Epstein. I imagine that there are all kinds of really disturbed people that are going to show up having been involved with him. Yeah. And the point is, they're not president of the United States.
And they didn't run on the notion that they're the crusader that's going to clean up the swamp and release all of this information and make Washington pure again. That's what he ran on, and that's what his supporters were running on. I did hear a very interesting interview with Jasmine Crockett, one of my favorite representatives in the House. She's planning to try to make a run for Senate, which I think would be nice, but she was asked, what we're getting is coming from, what was released so far has come from the Epstein estate, because the lawyer is only too happy to turn over whatever it is he's subpoenaed for. But the next question was, well, the women who were victimized, they know the names of these people. And Jasmine's response was very interesting to me because we know she's been in contact with some of these women, and she said they're afraid. They're afraid that if they come forward with what they know and disclose it, that they'll be harmed. And she meant physically harmed, not just a smear campaign. And I thought, wow, this victimization absolutely never ends. It's too disgusting for words that they still fear what they've been fearing since they were teenagers.
One wonders how many of them were pressured to signing NDAs at some point that are hanging over their heads as well.
I'm sure from news reports I read prior to the first time Trump was elected that's part of it. That there were rumors about, I won't even say what it is, but let's say mistreatment of women, that NDAs were signed for. And of course, he was found guilty of misusing campaign funds to shut one of his very expensive prostitutes up. So I don't know. I guess in the back of my mind, I'm thinking the women are afraid, or they've signed NDAs, which I think could be gotten around. But the point is, this will never end.
Yeah.
This will never end. It's too disgusting for words, but it will never end. And fine, whatever it is that the DOJ has, let's get it out there.
Let's get it out there and get it over with.
Yeah.
And, this is going to smear people. This is going to embarrass people. This is going to hurt people, innocent people. But it's going to happen,
Yeah, we've got one young woman who committed suicide, other women afraid of being hurt and harmed. Come on. Just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it. Not to, okay, maybe it'll harm Trump. I hope it does. But please, let us honor what these women have been through and say we're a better country than that. Let's bring some justice into it. Not that the Republicans care about justice, but really.
Speaking of Republicans,
Yes.
they're also scrambling right now to put forward a health care plan as to not give the Democrats a potential winning issue for the midterm elections when the Affordable Care Act premium subsidies are set to expire and more than double premiums. This is, as you recall, what the government shutdown was ostensibly about. The Republicans are just too dumb to just extend the subsidies a year to take the issue off the table, which would be the simplest solution. And they haven't been able to propose a viable program to replace Obamacare since 2016. And I don't see anything in this group of clowns that they've gotten smarter since then. Indeed, the contrary seems to be the case from everything else we've covered. And this is the bizarre thing about all this.
Yeah.
The solutions to this problem are simple. For starters, we could just fund Obamacare.
Yeah.
Secondly, we could set it up like Medicare, with ability to pay premiums, let the private sector sell Advantage plans if they desire, or just put everyone on Medicaid and Medicare and be done with it. If the folks with more money than sense wish to purchase private insurance, let them. Same with employment-issued health care insurance. If you negotiated a contract with your employer, fine. This is of no interest to the rest of us. There are any number of ways of providing health care using the private sector, the public sector, and it's just not that hard.
Well,
because we know how to do it. And, the Republicans are not going to find a free to cheap way of doing this. So it's like, bite the bullet, do something, get this off the table.
Well, I do agree. And I think just saying, why doesn't everybody get Medicare, would really solve the problem. I think Bernie Sanders has been saying this for decades. I was sorry that Obama took that off the table because he didn't think he could get it. But really, this is ridiculous. Every other country that bases its notion of law and civil justice on something other than private property ownership and profit takes care of this if they have the national wealth to do it. And we have the national wealth to do it.
In fact, we would spend less on health care doing this than we currently do.
Absolutely.
We have the most expensive healthcare system in the world. If you have an infinite amount of money, you get excellent health care. Otherwise, it's dicey. The average amount spent on health care per American is like $12,000 a year, and the assumption is if we put everybody on Medicare, that'd drop down to about $6,000 a year, which would be half as much for the same medical care.
Yeah, and it would drop because there's more healthy people in the pool, or why?
It's spreading the cost across everyone. It's the fact that there are efficiencies in the elimination of 35 different health insurance companies and forms that have to be filled out in each doctor's office every time somebody sneezes. It's a very inefficient bureaucratic system of managing private insurance, public insurance, and it's very burdensome on the physicians and the hospitals themselves. It would streamline the entire system.
It also creates such a level of uncertainty, whether you're on private or not. I mean, right now the people who are on what's called Obamacare, think about the uncertainty in their lives right now. As you say, the availability of that insurance allows them to redirect resources to other goods that they need. And now all of a sudden, how are they supposed to do it? But also for people working for institutions and corporations that provide insurance, their insurance premiums go up every year.
Yeah.
So how do you plan? How do you decide what you're going to be giving up in order to live a secure life?
Well, the characterization that I would use to describe our economy is one that maximizes insecurity to compel everyone to work to make their ends meet.
Should we turn from the sad state of American healthcare to Trump having a conniption fit about a BBC show that ran before he was elected?
Sure.
All right, so I did a deep dive into this, but just to remind our listener, the BBC program Panorama in October of 2024, so not recently, but in the fall, broadcast a 1-hour documentary called Trump, A Second Chance? Now, Panorama, for Americans, because we're not going to know this, began in 1953 on the BBC. It's the longest-running current affairs program in the UK. It's a weekly investigative journalism program. It is highly influential in shaping public debate and accountability. So if you could make it seem unreliable and you were the kind of person who wanted to get rid of the BBC, that would be a place to start, okay?
Right. Now, they do have, freedom of press in the UK, don't they, up to a point?
Oh yes, they do.
Okay.
Yes.
And no one has ever given an interview or done a show, including this one, that wasn't carefully edited, right? So why do you sue somebody over editing?
That's why I did a deep dive. Well, of course, Trump has brought these kinds of suits about how badly a program was edited before and gotten big political benefits out of it. I'll return to that in a moment. But his ire was triggered when the UK daily paper, and here I'm trying to explain why now, since this ran in October of 2024. Why now? A UK daily paper known as The Telegraph published a leaked memo sent to the BBC board and also the Editorial Guidelines and Standards Committee. This was an 8,000-word memo sent by Michael Prescott. Who is Michael Prescott? Michael Prescott is a former journalist. He was the Sunday Times chief political correspondent in the UK. He later became a communications consultant to some very large companies, and that's what he still does. And in fact, he's listed as a lobbyist in the UK. He was appointed an independent external advisor to the BBC committee in 2002. He left in the summer of 2025. He sent the memo in the summer of 2025 after leaving his BBC advisory position in June. So this was his post-farewell memo.
Okay.
He was already gone,
Yeah.
and now he writes this long memo. And he does go into a variety of reasons why the policies of the BBC need to be looked into. Now, he says that he expressed concerns about the systemic editorial problems at the BBC in this very long memo. One of the issues he raised was the Panorama episode that spliced together two statements from Trump's speech on January 6th that lasted an hour. And of course, it was the day of the riot, we know that, or as I like to call it, insurrection. The editing was so two different remarks made about an hour apart were presented as if they were continuous. That is to say, Trump said, we're going to walk down to the Capitol and I'll be with you.
Okay. Right.
And then later in the speech, he said, and we're going to fight like hell. Well, it made it seem as if this was all part of the same moment in that speech.
Right.
Although, okay, so there's an editing question there, but he really did say the business about fighting like hell. There's a question about it, and it's not something that a president who's lost should say. So it was after the Telegraph published their report that Trump was set into this angry state of his, and also called together his band of lawyers. Now, BBC director Sher Samir Shah acknowledged the edit was an error of judgment and apologized for how the clip was edited. Tim Davie, Director General of the BBC, and Deborah Turnus, head of the news division, resigned. The BBC said it would not rebroadcast the program, and the BBC has agreed that the clip was not well edited, but denied there was any basis for Trump's defamation claim. And Trump, on the basis of that defamation claim, has threatened to sue the BBC for $1 billion. Okay, in what sense might this be a form of theater?
In many. First of all, the possibility that even the possibility you could say something that would defame Trump is almost unimaginable because of everything he's done being so low and disgusting that it'd be hard to think of anything additional that would be problematic. The other thing is he's doing this to one of the few countries we have a trade surplus with. Why he's picking on the BBC? He likes to suck up to the British government. Theater, obviously, because the BBC nor the British government is not going to give Trump a cent. In fact, he has no standing in British courts probably to ask for it. Yeah, bad editing happens all the time. Just listen to our previous shows.
Hey, I'm the editor. That's enough of that talk. Okay.
I'm going to sue you for $1 billion.
Go ahead. Have fun with that. Okay. Let's take a closer look.
Yeah, really.
At Mr. Prescott. Who is he? He's registered as a lobbyist, as I said. Well, who are his clients? And why did he write that memo on his way? No, after he'd gone out the door. Okay.
And was on someone else's payroll.
Yeah, exactly. Several investigative reports note that Prescott has worked as a managing director at a communications lobbying firm with conservative-leaning clients, and has associations with individuals previously tied to right-wing media, describing him as a right-wing lobbyist in the context of this memo, which strongly criticized the BBC coverage from a viewpoint that some analysis says aligns with conservative or culture war critiques. So that raises the question, well, who are his clients? Well, one of his clients is the corporation known as Oracle.
Oh.
One of the world's largest technology companies that produces software, cloud services, and hardware. The largest share of Oracle is owned by one of its co-founders, Larry Ellison, a major Republican donor and a power behind the scenes in Trump world. Now that's interesting enough. Link there with a major donor to Trump world suggests that perhaps this was a setup, and some journalists say it was. Well, there's another little piece of information, and I'm not saying one way or the other if it was a setup, is that the other piece of information that has been reported is that the leak of that memo did not come from inside the BBC. It didn't come from the committees that received it. Well then, who gave it to the Telegraph? Maybe it was Prescott himself, because, he wrote it. I don't know. That's just speculation. Yeah. But it did not come from within the BBC. That's not where the leak was. Now, he was appointed to the BBC advisory position because of a recommendation from BBC board member Sir Robbie Gibb. I love British names.
Was he one of the Bee Gees? I asked if he was one of the Bee Gees, whose name is Robin Gibb, by the way.
I see, but is it a sir?
It probably is now.
Could be now. But he is a co-founder and early fundraiser of the pro-Trump news station GB News.
Oh.
Now, GB News is very right-wing, very right-wing in the UK. And that is co-owned by hedge fund multimillionaire Paul Marshall. Earlier this year, Marshall called for the BBC to be dismantled.
Oh man, next we got to do aliens and flying saucers.
The point is that, as I said, Panorama is a highly respected program.
Yeah,
And
I
it's-
believe it.
And
I
it's
just
highly influential.
right.
So to go after it over an editing critique that winds up with President Trump threatening a lawsuit of $1 billion, it's kind of an interesting moment, I would say, in the effort to shut down the BBC.
Do you think this really has legs in
No.
the UK?
Absolutely not.
So is this
No.
just more spectacle from the Trump perspective and a pain in the ass to the BBC and an embarrassment?
Yeah, it's a pain in the ass. I mean, after all, their director general and their BBC News chief resigned. But Michael Prescott himself has, as I've said, connections with Trump through his clients. He's also called, in some sources, a right-wing lobbyist, working as managing director for nearly a decade at Hanover Communications, a firm with long-standing Conservative Party ties.
Has he responded to this leak?
No, as far as I can tell, he hasn't said, "How dare somebody leak my memo?"
Well, that would be disingenuous, but
Yeah.
I mean, he hasn't said anything, I suspect.
I haven't found anything, but that doesn't mean he hasn't said anything.
That's all right.
Because-
British leakers are smarter than American
Well,
ones.
not only that, but, it's been very few days that this has been going on. The Byline Times, which is an online watchdog publication, found out that Hanover Communications has been paid at least $500,000 by 4 American media and technology corporations whose founders and executives are closely tied to Donald Trump. Prescott's firm represents, in addition to Oracle, Apple, Meta, and Paramount. So that's pretty much the core of big tech / U.S. entertainment and news media. And as you know, there was the decision to cancel Stephen Colbert over the desire of Paramount to be bought out by another very large media company. So this notion that behind this is, first of all, an effort to undermine the credibility of major news organizations, that's not new. I mean, they went after PBS, they went after CBS. I'd like to talk about that at a future date. But now they're thinking, well, why don't we undermine the BBC too?
I wish them the best of luck. I think that the BBC is so ingrained in UK culture that this is really not going to significantly damage BBC.
Yeah, although they've been embroiled in some pretty important, criticism in the past. But you're right, the confidence in the BBC is always high. Now, let me just say another word or two about Mr. Ellison.
Okay.
Okay. The Washington Post reported in November of 2020, November 14th. Remember a lot what's going on there? Trump didn't want to believe that he'd lost. The Washington Post reported that Ellison joined a strategy call with Trump aides aimed at overturning the legitimate results of the 2020 national elections.
Okay.
Okay, so we can see this connection there that's not very nice, that Prescott represents Oracle, that is the biggest shareholder, he's listed as one of the 10 wealthiest men in the world, this fellow Ellison. And Ellison, as I said, is very important in the backroom discussions in the Trump world. And the Oracle's EU filings disclosed about $200,000 in American money paid to Hanover Communications, again, one of Prescott's clients, in the last financial year for lobbying on cloud computing, artificial intelligence, data governance, and competition policy. And Oracle is vying for multi-billion-dollar euro public sector contracts.
This is astonishingly complex web of inanity. Right? I mean, I cannot see that this edit in this show damaged Trump in any way. Moreover, the BBC has responded apparently appropriately, in fact, probably overreacted appropriately to the accusation. And it seems like a lot of trouble to go through for Trump World to do this. I mean, geez, you'd think they'd have something important to do with the companies they own. I am finding the rationality of this action of these commercial enterprises and wealthy people incomprehensible. We're following the money, but Trump is a lame duck president and nobody likes him. So what do they expect to gain in terms of short-term policy that will be to their benefit? Were they all going to merge into one big company or something? I'm having a hard time seeing how this affects anything.
You're asking me to think like a multi-billionaire.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's probably...
and really, I can't go that low. But the point is, maybe there's an interest in discrediting media organizations internationally as part of a larger plan to create a climate where there's not a lot of investigative journalism, or where investigative journalists and their editors are afraid of being caught up in some kind of nothing burger lawsuit, because that is one of the strategies here, to create these huge lawsuits that force companies to cave in. Why they think the BBC is going to cave in, I don't know. But clearly they think they have a desire to do away with the BBC. I agree with you, this seems a bit futile, but then we're dealing, in the case of Trump, with a very infantile mind. But the timing of this is interesting. That this memo accusing the BBC of not living up to its highest standards and coverage, and one of the things mentioned is a program that aired in October 2024 that is then released by the Telegraph like a minute ago. That seems contrived. And I agree with you. I think it's contrived, and it will have overall not the effect that they want, but they got rid of the executive director of the BBC and the director of the news. I mean, how do you think that affects journalism and news coverage in a news organization?
I'm sure it's depressing, first of all, to see your organization cave and fire its leadership or ask its leadership to resign over something which is probably not a significant mistake. But again, it's one of these things that's going to backfire because this clip is going to be all over social media.
Oh, it already, yeah.
Yeah, somebody will find it. It will play 1 billion times.
Well, it already has.
Yeah.
Yeah, it already has. But the point is this, going after how something was edited, which I will talk about more next time, but the rules for editing visual are pretty much the same as they are for especially with a corporation like the BBC. The ethics are the same as they are when we quote somebody in an academic journal or a nonfiction publication. That you're not supposed to take things out of context, and where you leave words out, in written, you indicate it with 3 little dots, right?
You can even use the big kid word for that if you like.
Ellipsis?
Yeah.
I'm so excited. Okay. So what's the equivalent in editing visual? Well, one is the cross dissolve, where we see it so many times where somebody's talking and they cross dissolve to a later moment in the conversation. Mm-hmm. They can also run a time code underneath the clip to make it clear we started here, but now we've jumped to there. Well, that wasn't done,
Okay.
although I listened to Donald Trump that day. If he wasn't trying to incite a riot, I don't know what inciting a riot looks like. And he sat in the White House for hours watching it unfold. Because that's the other thing you have to consider when you're editing, just as in an academic sense, what's the context?
Mm-hmm.
So this seems highly contrived, I agree with you. Yeah. But some Weisenheimer who's advising Trump is telling him to go after how things are edited, because it was going after how CBS had edited the 60-minute interview with Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
That created this huge controversy. And we now have a right-wing influencer in charge of CBS, which I'm going to talk about next time.
So would the appropriate thing other than a crossfade was to have Trump make his first statement, a voice come in and go, blah, 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 and then play the next sentence?
Yeah. Somewhat later, ... Yes. That's pretty much what would have been.
Yeah.
It would have prevented this.
Yeah.
But then when they're editing it, that's not front of mind. I mean,
well, the other thing too is most of his speeches are so utterly incoherent.
Yeah.
In fact, if you had just played it, he'd be insulted by virtue of having to listen to himself talk. You know, they actually put it together like it was two sentences, and he rarely strings together two sentences that are coherent. So, you know, in some sense, they kind of improved his oratoric.
Yes, and
capacities.
that's another thing that I would like to discuss next week, is the way the media now is making Trump seem, if I can say this, far more coherent than he actually is. That his problems with stringing together sentences, his problems with going off on a variety of subjects that are totally unrelated to one another, has become highly noticeable, but it's not being covered. In other words, the one I heard about that was most interesting, and I'd like to get the transcript of, is, I don't know, this was a day when Trump was trying to show off the absolutely abominable changes he's making in the White House. And they were walking through what used to be the Rose Garden and is now a parking lot.
It's covered in cement. Okay,
it is.
I don't think there's yellow lines and handicap space.
Okay, all right, basketball court, call it what you will. And he starts describing what, in the reporter, there's a gaggle of reporters following him, and he starts talking about, the change here, but then he's off on another subject, and then he's off on a completely unrelated subject, and then he's off on another until it's a word salad. And that kind of signifier for dementia, and I'm not speaking lightly here, is not being reported. Mm-hmm. So people who are watching Trump and thinking, that guy's something wrong with him, they're right.
Now, I'm surprised that as a defensive mechanism, the media isn't just playing extended sound bites of that kind of babbling behavior.
They're afraid of him.
But they can't be criticized for poor editing if that's exactly what happened. It's like, geez, I appreciate you guys making me sound coherent, but could it be coherent in the way I want it to be?
Yeah. No,
I could tell. Yeah.
Well, I think that there's a level of journalistic, shall we call it, restraint because of this guy. I mean, he's capable of creating trouble in order of saying, you didn't edit that right, I'm not that incoherent. I don't know. I don't know what the answer to this problem is. When an executive in the Oval Office from the pharmaceutical company passed out, collapsed, there was Trump standing frozen, staring at the camera. President of the United States has had a man collapse in his office, and he's checked out. Well, I remember what they said about Biden when he went into those moments when he was frozen, not in touch, not oriented, as the medical people like to say. And it was I mean, they were making it clear that they thought he was non compos mentis. Well, what else would you say about that picture of the President of the United States standing slump-shouldered, staring at the cameras, while a man at his feet has just passed out? I think we're dealing now with a press that's not willing to say the obvious.
I guess next week we'll be able to tell our listener about the subpoena that we are, the lawsuit that's about to be delivered to us here. Broadcasting from a bomb shelter in Geneva, New York. Let's sign off for Plato's Cave for this week. We'll see you next week.
See you next week. Bye-bye.